Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Emerald Planet. All the ecology news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's your host.
Good evening. Welcome to the Emerald Planet, a program that talks about how to create more sustainable communities and a more sustainable planet. We're broadcasting live from FPA in Fairfax. I'm Nicolette de Vidar, your host for this episode. By 2050, two-thirds of the world's population will live in cities and urban environments. This poses a unique set of challenges, ranging from clean food to affordable housing. Many of us here in the DC area are already facing challenges on a daily basis. Who, for example, isn't exhausted by the long daily commute just to get to work? So, how can we make our cities greener and more livable? What are green cities, and what does this mean for us in our community? This is what we need to talk about with these guests. Cooper Martin, Director of Sustainability and Solutions within the Center of City Solutions at the National League of Cities, in brief, NLC. He is an expert in sustainable urban policy, and in his current role at NLC works with mayors, council members, and other local leaders to catalyze sustainability efforts. Douglas Stewart, co-founder and leader of Citizens for Smarter Growth in Fairfax. He is also the transportation chair of the Virginia Sierra Club. John Staley, a council member of the City Council of Fairfax and supporter of Virginia Go Green initiative. He's previous chairman of the City of Fairfax Parks and Recreation Advisory Board and has served on the Green Acres Feasibility Study Committee. Ken McMillan, a member of the Fairfax County Community Action Advisory Board. He's a staunch advocate of sustainable, affordable housing and has quite a story to tell. Dr. Jerry Poggi, a member of the Fairfax County Human Services Council, the NAACP Affordable Housing Committee. He's advocating that sustainable communities are an intrinsic part of the solution for the environment, traffic, housing, and other problems we have in the Northern Virginia area. Welcome to all of you on the Emerald Planet, and thank you for being here. And I'm going to take my seat so we can dive right in. In case you're wondering why we don't have a more diverse round of experts this evening, let me share that we had other guests confirmed who simply couldn't make it tonight. So I encourage our viewers across the board to participate and call in with questions for our panelists or for our guests as we go along. So good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Good evening. Good evening.
We're going to dive right in. I would like to start with you, Cooper. So NLC, for many that work in the sustainability space, the National League of Cities is a household name, but for many viewers out there that might not be quite so. So what does the National League of Cities do? Can you give us a brief overview?
Of course. Well, the National League of Cities is our country's oldest and largest organization representing local governments. We count about 2,000 member cities nationwide, the largest being New York City, and some of the smallest cities in the country are also among our membership. We're an advocacy organization, we're a networking organization. We provide executive leadership and training solutions for mayors, council members, and other city officials throughout the country.
So what is a green city?
Well, a green city, I think, for me, depends on the locality. It's going to be different in different parts of the country, different parts of the world. But most fundamentally, I think that it's a city that strives to provide for the needs of its residents today, while also bearing in mind the needs of future generations, both the children of current residents as well as those who may move into the area. So we want to ensure high quality of life, living standards, and livability, sustainability in the area, reducing the burden on rivers, the burden on land, the burden on agriculture, depending on which parts of the community or which parts of the country you're from. So for me, it's about defining locally in your metropolitan area or your micropolitan area, what are the ways that we can ensure that everyone has a high quality of life now and like I said, into the future.
And since the Washington, D.C. area is such a high growth area, which brings me right to Douglas for the next question. So you are co-founder of Citizens for Smarter Growth in Fairfax. What is that? What do you do there?
Well, this is Fairfax City Citizens for Smarter Growth, and we work to foster better development that's more walkable and bikeable, and really to have an affirmative vision of how our community should grow. Because we know that Fairfax and Northern Virginia and the Washington, D.C. metropolitan region will continue to grow. The question is, how do we grow, and how do we make that advantageous to our community so we're creating great places in the process? It's also, of course, about creating more sustainable places for our future generations. At the core, though, almost independent of that, it's about creating great places where we want to be, and we have an opportunity to do that. So our group was formed to take an affirmative approach toward land use development and toward transportation projects, and to provide a voice to folks like John and his colleagues on the City Council that there are citizens out there who want to say yes to something and want to say yes to change.
Talk to us a little bit about smart growth. So I encounter in everyday life a lot of people who even ask, what is a smart city and what is smart growth? What is that? Let's address the vocabulary here, as the start, as we go in. What is smart growth?
Well, smart growth really is about growing on one hand efficiently and sustainably so that we can afford it. Because a lot of growth that we've had in our communities, and Fairfax County is one of those communities, has been very spread out and has cost us a lot of money. As well as being environmentally unsustainable, it's fiscally unsustainable. If we grow more compactly, and this is not rocket science. This is how we have developed our communities for centuries and centuries. Really, the last 50 years have been an anomaly in human history. We have to go back to some things that we've done, back to the future almost, in that we have to grow in a way so that people can walk and bicycle and can take transit. That's fiscally better, because it doesn't cost a lot of money for either people or local governments to build a lot of roads, sewer lines, and infrastructure. And it's also better for people because they don't have to spend so much money on cars. Cars are very expensive. So really creating those growth patterns is what smart growth is about.
So I work downtown, and I will say every day when I go along the jungle of all those cars that are crawling into the city, I sometimes wonder, how would a city that has fewer cars look like, where you can actually still drive, and it doesn't seem like you're almost faster if you go by foot.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what we're trying to create here in Fairfax is a community where where it's feasible and pleasant and safe to make those trips, walking, bicycling, taking the bus. Absolutely.
John, you've been a council member of the city of Fairfax. So Virginia Go Green is one of the initiatives that you supported.
Yes.
Talk to us a little bit about what is it?
Well,
what does it do?
Absolutely. So Virginia Go Green was started by the Virginia Municipal League. And so we are in the Commonwealth, sort of that sub-agency to the National League of Cities. We're members of National League of Cities. We rely on a lot of what NLC provides, but we're also unique. And that's what VML provides. It's that voice for cities and towns within the Commonwealth. So they got together and said, what are some best practices? How can we share and think about green within our own Commonwealth? And that's what Go Green was about. It was a competition, an opportunity to have a checklist to know where to start, what you can achieve and can achieve. And in 2018, City of Fairfax was rated as gold from a Go Green perspective. So platinum is our next target over the horizon. We're in a bit of a hiatus here this year. In 2019, VML said, let's take a pause, let's look at the checklist, let's see what new ideas are out there, and let's look to refresh it in 2020. So we're eager to restart that in the coming future years.
So what would you need to do to go from gold to platinum?
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with how we think about growth, and that's where a group like Fairfax City Citizens for Smarter Growth is very helpful. You think about pervious surfaces, something I didn't know much about when I became a council member, and you start rethinking, well, what are we using on parking lots in new development? You ask different questions. What are we planting? Is it a native species? What does it do for rainwater? How do we think about that stream or stormwater problem we have? So they give you a set of tools to think through through and really ask better questions. Because remember, we have a great tradition here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I'm part-time, so we have other day jobs in there. So when you get to come into there, you have a limited time window to make those decisions, that Jeffersonian aspect of it, that citizen legislature. And so we're really proud of that. We need ears, we need guidance so that we can make the best decision with the information we have in front of us.
But do you think it is feasible that we will see and feel an impact short term?
I do, because I see it as our family. So I'm not a native Virginian, I'm from Western Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
I can tell you that we walk with our children to school, we walk to Rita's ice cream, we walk for dinner, because we've created those micro neighborhoods that Douglas is talking about. We've also solved the problems of missing leaks. You know, Shel Silverstein has a great book, Where the Sidewalks Ends. It's not great for transportation when you're on foot. When that sidewalk stops and you have nowhere to go, people get confused. So you look at those little problems you can solve within your own community, you can actually make a pretty big difference. The city of Fairfax has a stated goal right now of moving from 44% to 100% of our residents being able to be in a walkable neighborhood. What that means is they're less than a 15-minute walk to where they want to go. What better could you ask for healthy living and an active lifestyle than to walk to dinner and walk back home? You get to see your neighbors, you get to pick them up along the way, and that creates that resilient community we're all looking for.
Do people get bored? What do you think? If
I don't-
everything is in walkable distance, do people get bored?
I think it's not a flip the switch. We are going to have cars, right? My wife and I are going to continue to own 2 cars because we have 2 children who play sports. It's going to happen where we're going to need to be in 2 places at once and quickly in the element. But every time I don't get in my car is one less car that you have to navigate through. So it's not about switching it completely. It's about finding that right mix where if it's not raining out, it's a beautiful day, I'm going to walk. If it's raining out, that's not going to happen, right? And so there's different little elements in there. I'm not quite as diehard as Douglas here, or see biking in the rain, but maybe I'll get there someday. But it's having that option. It's having that way where even one less trip is a positive impact on our community.
So having everything in walkable distance also means there needs to be an element that we're going to talk about tonight, which is affordable housing, because to have everything in walkable distance, you do need housing that is affordable so people really can make a living and live off the salary and the job they're actually having versus having to have 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet. So Ken, which brings me to you, you are a steadfast advocate of affordable housing. Tell us a little bit why.
Well, I guess we can go back to when I became homeless. And one of the things I realized that I didn't have the necessary things that causes other people to become homeless, but what I had was a ear to being able to walk in other people's shoes. Long before that, I wrote a song about a homeless guy in DC called Man on the Corner. That was probably in the later 1970s into the 1980s. And then in 2004, I became that song. And it was interesting that I was probably too busy thinking about how did I get here, what were the root causes, how could I address this. Once I got there, it was more about how can I get myself out and help other people to get out. Well, housing is obviously a big problem of the situation. But unlike most of you all, I am older than most of you all. So when we talk about sustainability in housing, okay, I walked to school. Elementary, junior high, and high school, okay? Never was a problem in the snow, in the rain, and you hear people talking about, yeah, I used to walk uphill and everything. No, good for me. When I was growing up in Southeast, everything was quite level, but it was a thing to do because once we got into the mid-70s and we had the gas embargo, I remember the yellow, orange, red days of carbon, you know, where the cars were polluting so much. I never want to see that again. Now, unfortunately, with some of the rollbacks, we're having that again. So it's not just about housing that's affordable, because when you think about once you get into a renter situation, the biggest cost that you're probably going to have is going to be your rent, and the next thing comes your utilities. If we don't start building houses that are a little bit more energy efficient, we can almost, you know, wipe out some of that bill, which means people will have a lot more money to put towards medical, to put towards food, you know, to put towards childcare. All those things come into fruition, and it circles around housing that's affordable first and efficient, sustainable, so to speak.
Which brings me right to you, Jerry. Actually, this was a great lead-in because you keep saying that affordable housing really is an integral part of sustainable communities, and a lot of people that are out there that are not quite like really diving into the subject as deeply, sometimes it seems to me have an issue in terms of making the connection between sustainability and affordable housing. It almost looks like very often it's used as two separate concepts. Can you draw the connection for our viewers?
So I think, that's a great point. People think in different silos, perhaps, and fail to understand. We just thought of our everyday lives. How many people we touch in our everyday lives? Start off the morning, rush to a coffee shop, grab a cup of coffee on your way to work. The person behind that counter is a real human being living and contributing services in that community. We might stop off at the dry cleaners and pick up some clothes on our way. We might actually ride on a bus or a metro system driven by somebody to get us in and out of the city. Every one of those people, the bus driver for our children, the school administrators in their elementary or high school, all those people are providing vibrant context for our sense of communal well-being. Every one of those people needs to have the opportunity to live in the community where they're doing those services. And right now, Fairfax County, 1.2 million people. The average salary in Fairfax County is around $50K. Those are the new jobs that are coming into our county. If we do not provide housing for the people at those salary levels, we're condemning them to distant transport, huge carbon footprints that cost everybody in our community because they're living in Dunwoody or they're living in West Virginia, and they are stealing time from their children's lives and their own lives to do that long commute. A sustainable community has to be one that finds homes for everybody who is a really vibrant part of that community. That'll include people whose marginal economics is because they might have a disability. They can't work a full-time job, but yet they are born into this community. They should reside in that community. And we, as a county, need to begin to reform our thinking about making sure we have affordable homes for all. That's an essential component of sustainability. And if we're going to get there, we're going to have to put that first and foremost. There are some hopeful signs that we're going to move in that direction.
What are those hopeful signs?
Well, let me give you an example. The boards of supervisors for Fairfax County in this last budget cycle found the willfulness to add $5 million into our housing trust fund, as well as to direct the county executive that in the coming year's budget, figure out how we could add a penny's worth of real estate value to do more support for affordable housing. Now that would equate to $25 million per annum if it becomes iteratively embedded. That's the start on dealing with the fiscal side of making us whole. There has to be a whole bunch of policy sides to it and a whole bunch of community engagement if we're going to build the willfulness to understand everybody who we touch in our daily lives. We need to feel that they're a vibrant part of our community they deserve, and we need to have them live in our communities. Just as we heard, some people will need to have an automobile to go visit grandma and grandpa in another state or to do other things. Teenagers want to get to other events in other portions of the world. We'll always have that. But if we have a root community where people see a walkable, bikeable, everyday experience as being the largest portion of their everyday experience, then we're going to be far more sustainable than we've ever thought to be, and we're going to be in a more beloved community situation than we ever thought we could have.
I'm going to go to Cooper here for a second. Cooper, because you were with the NLC, can you give us sort of a high-flying overview in terms of general trends of making cities greener and more livable across the United States? So I'd like to sort of talk first about the trends, and then we dive down to what that means in our community. Talk to us a little bit general trends in other cities. Are there some leaders? Are there some real heavy laggers? Where's the potential?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is that a lot of the issues that have just come up in this conversation already are not unique to the DC metro area, and are not even unique to big cities. The relationship between sustainability, affordability, housing, and commute times is something that's striking communities of all size around the country right now, for reasons of maintenance, for reasons just of historic congestion. So I think it's very interesting to always keep that in front and center. And at the National League of Cities, we're always trying to convince our members that their local area is unique and it's special, but it's not that unique and special. There's plenty to learn from other communities around the country.
Yes.
And I think people who are tuning into this program, people who have looked at sustainability and affordability, aren't going to be surprised to hear some of the leaders over the last several years, cities like San Francisco, like Portland, Oregon, Chicago, and a few others. But there's all kinds of other sort of hidden areas. Phoenix is one of the leading cities in the country right now on zero waste and trying to create circular economies, driving businesses that are reusing and recycling materials in their local area. When it comes to housing, I'm sorry to say I don't know exactly who if we can say who the leaders are in this nation right now, because it really has become such a crisis. But for the last year and a half, we at the NLC have been pulling together a task force on housing, addressing issues of affordability, addressing issues of quality, getting to the utility bills that Kenneth mentioned earlier. So there are hopeful signs all over the country in different cities. I don't know if anybody's really found the right mix of all the different policies where they can say, yes, we're walkable, we're bikeable, we're also affordable, we're also low carbon. And so I think that's the really elusive piece of this, is there's so many different pieces where cities are leading in one way or another, but we haven't quite hit the mark and said, oh, well, that city's doing it right. Everybody should just emulate all of the policies. And so you still have to pick a blend of different things from across the country in order to find something that'll work a little bit better in your own communities.
Yeah, I would also think that because cities have different circumstances and different environments, I don't think there probably is going to be like one size fits all.
Certainly
so
not.
The question is then, how do cities go about and kind of make it happen to see this really works for us, this is where we're most competitive, this is where we have the talent for, and so on. So you mentioned Phoenix, for example, zero waste. That's a classic example, like of one thing what they focus on. Is there a trend in cities generally, like where they focus on some of the local opportunities that they have and kind of build on that?
Absolutely, and I think this is something we've really seen the last several years, really since the Paris Climate Accords. I think it started to ramp up, and you saw not just commitments to go green with a long-term goal. By 2040 we'll do this or that or the other thing. You really started to see after Paris cities setting near-term goals, like no, in 3 years we're going to be here, in 5 years we're going to be there, and that I think has really kicked a lot of cities into much more focused action. Passing multiple different types of sustainability or green growth, smart growth plans that are driven much more by metrics and not by these long-term aspirations. So that was certainly a turning point. And then frankly, when Trump pulled out of the Paris Agreement just about a year and a half ago, I think, that was another pivotal moment. We had hundreds of cities around the country who signed on and made pledges and said, no, the country might not be in, but our community is going to make it. We're going to have the 2027 goal. We're going to start reducing our emissions now, and they've really done it, particularly with energy efficiency in housing, with alternative transportation. And the most inspiring thing is with their own municipal operations.
Right.
Taking their sets of buildings that they own, they run, their staff is in them, and making those as green as possible. And there we've seen 20, 30, 40, 50% emissions reductions just in the past several years.
So that does sound that a lot of the things are really beginning to happen more on a local level. So independent, sort of like who's in charge on the big picture thing. You have a lot of things that are attainable at local level. When we look at the area we're having here now, what are some of the changes that we've been seeing here in the area? Ken, you want to go?
Yes. It was interesting. A while back when I was working for a big box hardware store, the customers were coming in and they were asking me if I knew of any contractor that would install solar panels. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately at the time, they were telling me, and I don't know because I'm a renter in an apartment building, but I've always thought that was a brilliant idea, whoever came up with it. I thought that it would be pretty simple, but it wasn't, because the cost of installing those panels, kept people away from. And I thought, you get energy savers taxes, a rebate, if you buy a refrigerator, if you buy windows, if you buy doors, if they're under that program, you'll get a credit for that. Oddly enough, just this year, one of my friends who happens to live in Fairfax City had solar panels installed on their house. Guess how much it cost them to do just the installation when they sent her next month's bill after the completion of those panels? Guess what it was? Guess what the cost was? Oh, I gotta guess. $1.
$1.
$1. And this is from Dominion. Somebody I really don't feel a whole lot of
Her electricity bill is
love
$1.
for, okay? But to give someone that kind of incentive to have their installation cost wiped completely away. All of a sudden, I'm looking at this on Facebook, and then I see Dominion is offering, and I don't know if it's statewide, but at least in the county of Fairfax, free installation of solar panels. That right there is a stretch into the right direction. And I couldn't believe it that this company that I'm not very enthusiastic about liking something must have slapped them in the face. But that's the kind of initiative we need for all municipalities to look into. California right now, I was looking through this information, they are giving incentives for any developer to include in any property that they're building a tax cut on all energy efficient things. Now the upward cost is quite extensive if you're building, okay? Mm-hmm. But over the long term, your return on investment is like completely, you'll gain that within less than 5 years from the, from the savings that you make. So if they go to ca.gov, they can pull up this information and not only gives you how to file, to ask for help and everything like this, but it shows you what it can cost and what it'll do for you and everything like that. So I would say that we're moving in the right direction, but not nearly fast enough.
Yep. So we're going to get ready to head into the break. We've already used up like half of the segment, but when we come back, we continue our talk about how to become a more sustainable community and what that means for each of us. We'll also talk about specific challenges and solutions, and I would like to keep up the conversation going and really becoming quite specific in what we can do, where we are now, and what we can do.
I can't believe we broke Old Man Hennessy's window.
Correction, dude. You broke. I just threw the ball.
This is really bad. What are we gonna do?
We? Go to the door, ask for the ball back.
Are you serious?
It's my ball, Myrtlebeck.
You're so dead. I'd run away.
Yeah, to Uruguay.
Kiss your life goodbye. Sorry.
Let's go. See ya. Remember me and your well.
Nice one. Some friends you are. Hi. Tell him it was an accident. And we can fix the window. Come on. I'll come with you.
Loyalty. Pass it on.
You go first.
A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Wanted some matches and that's no good. Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about ripped off life. Nothing very nice on a homeless mind. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
Awkward. I'm the awkward silence. You try to avoid me, then there I am again.
But an awkward silence can be a great thing.
Like Kelly here is about to demonstrate.
You haven't really been yourself lately. Are you okay?
Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org.
We're back to the Emerald Planet. Here again, your host.
Today we're talking about greener cities and how to make our communities more livable. In the second half, we'll talk a little bit more about challenges and solutions as we go forward. So we spoke, as we headed into the break, about a specific incident about a house, and you said you had something to add to that, so I'm going to give it to you.
Yeah, Kenneth was talking about a house in the city of Fairfax, and,
Yes.
and that program is part of an initiative called Solarize, right? Solarize Northern Virginia, where we've had multiple municipalities together over several years competing to see who could get more homes to sign up to get a solar review to see if their house would make sense to be solarized, right? A lot of people don't know the options that are out there if you don't give them a chance to check it out, because not everyone's roof is necessarily perfectly set up to be solarized. And so you get them a chance to get a free estimate, see what it's like, and you can see a tangible result of someone deciding to sign up for it and move it forward. I think those small steps are really what will make the large difference going forward. Let me give you another example on the waste side of things.
Yep.
So Cooper talked about how do you find those right nuggets that are out there. Conversations with other elected officials, I think, are the backbone of that information exchange. So we were at a Virginia Municipal League event talking with our friends in the city of Falls Church, and they mentioned they did a curbside composting program. We went, wow, that's very interesting. And one of my new council colleagues, Jennifer Passy, said, I want to run with that, right? So an idea and an energy. Working with George Mason University, we now have a pilot program in the city of Fairfax, leveraging the city of Falls Church knowledge to compost in our city. People get bags at home, they take them to our central location. And to date, we've taken 13 tons that would have gone to the landfill and is now composting. 25% of what we throw away is compostable.
Yep.
I didn't know that until somebody said, hey, what do you think about that? Over 300 households, over 5,000 composting bags and caddies have been shared, and people are starting to do it. So it doesn't often happen with necessarily a big bang. It can happen over time. The part I like about local government is we're nonpartisan, right? There is no Republican or Democratic way to pick up the trash. There is smart ways to do it, however. And if you give people the opportunity and the education, you can really foundationally change the way they do things over time. I didn't understand it until I saw my 10 and 7-year-old who now are frustrated if we don't have an extra composting bag to put our food scraps in, because it's become a habit for them, right? Those little things that we can change right for a specific city can move it forward. One city sharing with another, an excellent council member running with an idea, and now you have action. That's the virtuous cycle of government we can create.
So how do citizens find out about that?
Yes.
How do you know about that? How do they learn about that?
I think one of my pleas for this particular program is be more engaged at the local level. We are where it's at. I do not get enough emails that, let me be very clear on this, are positive action oriented, right? I get a lot of what's wrong, which is fine, and I'll keep them coming, but what I like in there are the nuggets of how do we also solve the problem. A great example of that is our middle school. So Lanier Middle School, walking distance to my house, has a permanent green flag. And what that means is for 4 years, they earned a Green Flag Award for their work they're doing in sustainability. FISA alum has been an amazing catalyst for those students who live in the city of Fairfax and our county to force us adults to think differently. And when you see that flag flying there, it's a reminder, a physical presence of what we can do to do better. So that's how we get in touch. You share the ideas, just like we had with the City of Falls Church, and say, be engaged in the conversation. Tell me when those bags are empty at City Hall. Tell me if you want another location to drop things up. Be loud when good things happen, just as loud as when bad things happen, and we can really create a positive momentum go forward.
Yeah, we actually had a special episode about Lanier Middle School, which was very well received. We talked about, in a different context, so we talked about STEM, which is very important, and also learning from nature, which in the 21st century are probably one of the most predominant topics. And the interesting thing is they're all interconnected.
Very much
so you cannot talk about sustainability, affordable housing, transportation issues if you really are not able to connect the dots and see them in context. Douglas, do you see, in the work that you do you see that citizens are making the connections, or is there a lot more room to educate better on this one?
Well, in Fairfax, really, there's been extraordinary upswing of citizen involvement. I'm talking about Fairfax County and Fairfax City. Really, citizens really getting a helmet on and getting into the game and trying to find out kind of how can I affect change in my community. Honestly, I think part of it may be related to events on the federal stage and a certain sense of waking up and, I have to be the solution. I got to stop griping and I got to do something. So there's a lot more organizing going on around a lot of different issues, including housing. In the recent elections for Fairfax County Board, there's been a lot of activity in educating local elected leaders and candidates about housing, for one thing, and the connection between housing and transportation, exactly what Jerry was talking about. So there is a lot, I think, more engagement, but at the same time, Fairfax is a very busy place. People are very ambitious. They come here often for the great schools and because they have a great job. And these people are very educated, very smart, but often don't have the time or the bandwidth to devote to civic activities. I'm starting to see that change.
Jerry, I saw you, so I'm sure you have something to add on to that.
This is really stimulating.
Right.
It just hits me you're at the right place. Let me give you an example of where the transportation issue, your issue, is sort of informing discussions about community development in Fairfax County. One of the biggest planned projects is the Embark project along Route 1 in the South County. Now that's a challenging environment. You could see disparities on one side of Route 1 from the other side of Route 1. The economic divides and oftentimes the social divide can be enormous. But that community is learning from the lessons that the city of Minneapolis has pursued in doing their 2020 Minneapolis planning process. And that's the process of community engagement. Community engagement isn't saying we're going to have a meeting at Fairfax County Government Center, everybody is invited, and think that the few people who show up are informed about the entirety of the community's needs. That's bad public engagement. You have to go where people are. The city of Minneapolis went through 3 major learning phases of community engagement, and they count that as the largest reason why they are enthused and moving progressively to a new model of community development where housing is, essential for that equation. How are they going to retool their zoning and planning process, and how are they going to win community support for that? Ken and I earlier this year were at the Center for American Progress hearing Mayor London Breed, the charismatic mayor of San Francisco, who rose to her position from having been raised in public housing, described how she has had to build a YIMBY movement, not a NIMBY movement, a YIMBY movement. That means getting those emails in about what do we need. Young people in particular are feeling dispossessed from the access to affordable housing. That's the start of a new energized movement that says we can have it all. We can have a built new community where everybody of all economic means have a chance to thrive and have a chance to thrive together. This is the death of America if we go to 1%ers gated around over here and everybody else in long commutes. That's not a real community. That's one that's impoverishing everybody. Even the wealthiest people are impoverished when they only live together and talk to each other as opposed to the rest of the world. So we can do much more, and we are doing it slowly but surely. I'm with Ken. Good things in the offing, not fast enough.
And to just build on that for a second, the city of Fairfax just went through a new comprehensive plan approach. So what do we want to be in 2035? And our vision talks about, in the third word, a strong, sustainable economy. This is good for the economy. Diversity of people is good for the economy. So I appreciate all the sentiment about, how people need to learn together, we're better, I agree. But economically, it's also very powerful.
Yes.
And that's what we've got to not lose sight of there. This is not a handout, it's a connectivity that makes it very special. And really good ideas come when you have 40 different languages spoken in the schools.
Yes.
When you have a Title I school, that means you get to sit across the table from someone who has a very different experience than you, because then your energy starts to go, the connectivity starts to go, and you create things, which we've done from the beginning as a society, when you have that beautiful melting and mixing of people from diverse backgrounds. That's when we're better. When I get to walk my kids to school and I get to hear different languages, different cultures, different energy, space. When I go to a family heritage night and I don't know what half the food is, we're better because of that. And economically, when I look at our restaurants, we have 2 Uyghur restaurants, right? We're economically better. That's drawing people from other places. Mama Chang's is a hit, and when I go in there, I see people I've never seen before. That's the great empowerment of an economic boost when you create the space for these things to occur that is sustainable.
Yeah, I would add on to this also that when you have different people from diverse backgrounds, different cultures, etc., of course, many also experience different living conditions in the places where they are. So in some countries, they're a little bit further advanced. I'm, for example, European, so many of the things, when I came over here, I'm like, oh, you're not recycling, you're not collecting the plastic bags. I feel like I'm going around the office space, really going through the garbages and sort of picking things out, saying, well, why does nobody recycle, right? Why is it all mixed and mingle? So, and then you have other people from other backgrounds where they have a different view of how they deal with nature. They're more integrated in how they learn from nature and things like that. So that definitely is a big, big factor. I do want to address one other part, because we talk about the economic region, and I think we all agree that this is a very, very growing, powerful, dynamic region. So we have a lot of tech firms, we're getting a lot more consumer goods firms, we're really branching out. Not to speak, of course, about Amazon coming here, etc. But let me ask you one important question, though. Do employers understand the enormous challenge we have with housing and transportation? What's your take on that?
I don't believe that some of the, let's say, ancestral employers, the groups that have been here for a long time, don't necessarily see that. Like I said, I mentioned a big box that I work for. For me, growing up the way I grew up and having to think about one of my subordinates driving 2 miles one way to get to work because he could not find housing that was affordable. It didn't just make me a little concerned, I was really pissed off. And I thought, and this is me, I will step down to make you a supervisor so you can make a little bit more money. And I will go back to being an employee. I may work for you. That was my take on that. But there are employers who don't realize the difficulty of what their employees are going through on a daily basis. Part of that problem is because when you're in that situation, you're not really enlightened to discuss your personal interests, your personal problems with someone that you can't have that sit-down family member conversation with, because you might be shunned upon, you just don't know. But until the employee really comes together and has, let's say, a town hall meeting just for my employee, I don't care if you only have 5 of them, have a seat with them at a table and let them talk. You don't have to give out orders and demands, but learn to see it from their point of view. I do that a lot more than I think of myself. I go into the communities and I ask questions. Where I live, which is not far from Fairfax City, it's called Circle Towers. I call it the United Nations building of the county because we have every demographic there. So when I see a person on the elevator, I don't just say, hello, how you doing? I've learned a few different words in different languages, but I ask them, how are they doing? Because I really want to know. If I'm going to truly represent the community that I live in, I really have to know how they feel. Not how I think they feel. I have to know how they feel at the lowest level. What are your complaints? Like you said, this is a new take that we need to embrace. So that was a very good question. I don't know what other people have to say about that.
Yeah, it's a big question. One thing is that a lot of trends that are positive in smart growth, walkability, more bikeable communities are actually being driven by the choices of employers, like Amazon, who are choosing to locate in areas that are near transit and pedestrian friendly. And that's sending a signal to governments like Fairfax County and Fairfax City that we need to think about changing our building patterns.
Yes.
So employers are a positive force for change, I think, in that regard.
Please, I'll
So I can give you a couple of examples locally that's
Yeah.
happened recently. One is we just developed the Phase 2 recommendations of the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee to drive the process of new policies. One of the most potent voices on that was a representative from the Dulles Chamber of Commerce, because he sees the struggle in the business world for the housing needs for the very workforces. This is back to good economies. Good economies, businesses don't come here only bringing in seven-figure salaried employees. They come with all sorts of levels of employees, and they need to be guaranteeing that that housing is had. The Reston Chamber was present and in front of the arguments for the rail to Dulles height increases, density increases, which is where you want to have density increases along major transportation corridors. You want them to be part of a new vision of growth in that area. And the chambers are recognizing that's one of the few open spaces, if you will. It may be elevated, but it's an open space for creating more affordable housing for all and building a nexus of new types of community in and around major rail stops. That's a transportation hub is an essential ingredient for connecting people. But the people who live there aren't going to need cars to get into DC for a concert or to go out to something else near Dulles Airport. They're going to have the rail system there. And we need to think differently and more complexly about that. That's where people are going to be using, buses and bikes for whatever rentals, short-term rentals you want to have, or scooters. That's the new communities that young people are already embracing in urban areas all over this country.
Cooper, did you have something to add?
Well, I don't know if I could have said it better. I think the chambers of commerce, like he says, businesses are being attracted to communities, and you saw it in Amazon's request for proposals, that what they were looking for from a city. They explicitly said, we want transit, we want walkability, we want the kinds of neighborhoods that our employees in Seattle and in Austin and other communities around the country tell us they want. It was the same, I believe, with Volkswagen when they relocated to Chattanooga, Tennessee. So you see all of this happening, and then even at the higher level, I hate to go back to COP21 and the international agreement again, but if you start to look at pension funds, major sovereign wealth funds, and the kinds of long-term investments that they're making, they're moving towards more sustainable investment decisions so that they can put their money where their mouth is, not just in terms of locating businesses and locating employees, but in terms of being good stewards of the long-term investments that they have for their pensions and for reinvestment. So you've really seen a lot of capital start flowing towards sustainable, more integrated, more livable communities globally.
Of course, there's also the millennial force, which we're millennials who have a very different expectations and way of life, and also feel that they have a lot louder voice to kind of contribute. So when it goes to the employer side, it is heavily driven by the millennial workforce coming in. And there are indeed, I do know of some employers that are really making choices, even in terms of thinking we need to relocate, even within the Washington, D.C. DMV, to actually go and meet more where the talent is, or where most of their talent lives, to sort of fit better into that community. You were about to say something.
Well, I was going to say, we've got some evidence that says we can do this well. So I have the privilege of being the vice chair of the Chesapeake Bay and Water Resources Committee for the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. We just released a report about the Potomac.
Yes.
Right? And you know, when you have more people, you have more things going out the end, right?
Yes.
And we were able to say that
Yes.
the Wilmington plan is working very well. We're able to reduce nitrates despite more population coming in there. The next big challenge is really stormwater for our area.
Right.
So as we develop, we actually have an opportunity to improve the environment, because we know a lot more than those surface parking lots that were there before. So development can actually be a really positive catalyst, not only for the type of density, but also for our environment as well, to leverage the two of those together. So there's a synergy opportunity here if we really think about how we can put more people in there. You know, people in the city of Fairfax often cringe when we realize we're probably going to go from 24,000 to 29 or 30,000 people over the next 15 years. They go, where are they going to go? Well, we're going to go up. Right by Circle Towers, you have Scout on the Circle coming.
Scout on the Circle.
More people coming in there, but that's going to create that micro area. It's going to improve stormwater. And here's the other part I like about the Amazon elephant in the room, right? Not only are you going to have Amazon, but you're going to have all the spin-offs. You're going to have all those startups there, and they're not going to live in an office.
No.
They're going to meet at a coffee shop. They're going to be on Wi-Fi, and they're going to be back and forth in there. So being ready to handle that type of change, whatever it's going to be. I'm the oldest of 5 boys. My youngest brother's 22. I see what you're talking about in that next generation. They're still figuring themselves out of what they really want. And the generation behind them is going to be even different. So really, when we think now about development, we're looking for not just millennials, but that next generation behind them as well, because that's how long that built structure is going to last. And that's a big guessing game. So we ought to embrace the uncertainty. We know it can do good for the environment. We know it can do good for economics. Let's play the hand we've been dealt.
And I hope, to your point, that Paul VI, which I thought would have already broke ground by now, but it's another place. And thinking forward, like you just said, if we're going to have this explosion of Amazon employees that are looking for a place, that's an excellent place to start right there in the Fairfax city. Not just for the county, but so like Jerry said, we need to circumvent, and I don't like to use the word circumvent. I really, really would like to sit down with a group of people and see why they don't want this in their backyard. I want to understand what their scope of the way of their thinking, because then I'm going to tell them, you have no idea how yes in your backyard will lift you up more than it will take away what you already got.
Well said.
Douglas, I have a question for you. So when we spoke on the phone, you mentioned that there are some really big decision points to be made or in the near future in terms of Fairfax. What are those?
Well, it really boils down to land use and transportation. Land use, there's a lot happening in Fairfax County in terms of redevelopment. Redevelopment near metro stations, right near here in at the Innova. On Gallows Road, there's a major redevelopment proposal, and we have to get it right. That means we don't widen all our roads to accommodate all this new development. We try to create more walkable connections, bridges over the Beltway so that people can walk to nearby neighborhoods. Things are very close together. It's our transportation infrastructure that's a little dysfunctional and keeps those walking trips from being more viable. So we really have to get these decisions right. Very important, and we need to change our paradigm. Second thing is, on transportation, we need to really look at our transportation investments. The state has changed the way it does transportation in a very positive way. It's a much more transparent process of evaluating its transportation investments. It gives much more opportunity for localities to actually determine, which Fairfax City has done a great job of, by the way, of determining what do we want to do, what are we going to invest in, and you have a fighting chance of getting those good community investments funded now. So really, we need to continue on that path and really make good transportation investments for sustainable communities.
Can I ask you a question? I like what you said, because everybody thinks with the massive traffic jams we see. I sold my last car that I actually owned back in '93 to my brother for $1. I have not owned a car since then.
Wow.
Public transportation has been my way of life, even when I was working for the federal government in D.C. I could catch a cab. This is long before Uber and what's the other thing? The
Lyft?
takeoff?
Lyft.
Yes, that thing, whatever that stands for. But you said widening the roads. Now you know that Governor Hogan is trying to widen the Beltway. The thing about that I see, and I'm not talking about the way the community feels about losing their land, but I'm thinking to myself, why are you widening the road? Why not look at what's causing the problem with the traffic that you have and look at those issues before you come with an ultimatum which may fall onto Route 66 and widen the road? What do you think about that? Because you mentioned it.
I couldn't agree with you more. There's absolutely, it's induced demand. When you widen roads, it fills up like a gas. And that's what we really need to, we need to have a different way of thinking and planning.
Yes, and that actually is right about the paradigm shift, which is really the big crux of the matter, because we no longer have a linear world. So the linear thinking in terms of when we just add another lane, that would solve the problem, clearly doesn't work. So then the question, so we talked a little bit about what are some of the challenges, what are possible solutions. We have a few minutes left. I do want to talk a little bit about what does that mean for the citizen. So can we say what makes a sustainable citizen, and what are there things for our viewers also that are must-knows, so to speak, as in how do they participate, how can they prepare themselves, how can they move forward on that? So why don't we just go around? Who wants to?
I'm getting ready to buy a bike.
Okay. Yes.
So I'll get back to kind of our city of Minneapolis and their plan. A very aggressive, very active plan of engagement, and an engagement that isn't a one-time only. It's building the process of a new form of civics where people are engaged, they stay engaged, and they begin to be invested in the whole context of the community. If we're just in it for ourselves, we're only going to get a limited number of people to succeed. We're all codependent, and we have to have a sense of the commons is our common responsibility. And that means branding civics as something that you show up for the meetings of the town council or for the city government, and you're invested at the federal, at the state, and the local level. Let me just give you an example on housing. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts last year put together a bond for $1.8 billion for affordable housing. Massachusetts is going to outcompete Virginia if we don't seem to make the same kinds of investments in sustainable housing.
We're going to have to go around and do it quick. We have about 1 minute left. So what would you tell your viewers or our viewers as a takeaway point quickly from that?
Get involved with your local governments, okay? Know what's going on, and if you don't know, you have to get involved to ask the questions so you will know.
What about you?
Stay engaged locally. Know what you want in your backyard. Find something to say yes to.
View change as an opportunity. I think that we can make the world a better place.
Make your community work well with its neighbors as well, not just in your community, but transportation's a network. It's not just about Fairfax City, just about Fairfax County. This is a regional approach that's needed.
And that's the other part, of course, of the paradigm shift. Now we all really need a very integrated approach in how we do things and have to bring all stakeholders to the table. Well, thank you very much. That's it for tonight. Thanks so much for watching.